This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the NFL wire site from the USA Today family of sites covering the Arizona Cardinals, and my co-host, as always, is Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, the Arizona Cardinals site for SB Nation's fan sites. And this is episode 243. The Cardinals have won again, this time in a shootout where there was a lot of offense and not a lot of defense. A 34-33 victory over the Atlanta Falcons. They are now 2-3-1. That's 2 consecutive wins. And Patrick Peterson returns. In this episode of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, Seth and I are going to react to the offense and the offensive production. David Johnson, Chase Edmonds, Kyler Murray. We're going to give our thoughts and reactions to the offense in the game and the production that we're looking at as the season has progressed. We're going to react to the defensive side of the ball. We're going to talk about Patrick Peterson and his return. How will he change the defense? There's been some moves in the division. Yeah, Jalen Ramsey to the LA Rams. Marcus Peters traded away from the Rams. What does the division now look like as the San Francisco 49ers continue to be unbeaten and the Rams appear to be falling quickly? The trade deadline approaches in a couple of weeks. So we'll look at if there's any moves that the Cardinals should make. Are there any positions to target? And then we'll look ahead at their next game against the the New York Giants, who have a worse record than the Cardinals. They will be on the road, potentially Saquon Barkley returning, and a battle of the top 2 quarterbacks taken in the draft of Kyler Murray for the Cardinals and Daniel Jones, as the people back east like to call him, Danny Dimes, whatever. We're going to talk about that all on this edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, so let's go ahead and get started. So Seth, we get started here in this edition of the show. My goodness. Let's get started with the talk from the game. First off, how surprised were you at the result of that game, of how things went, that they actually got the win?
I'm not surprised they got the win. The Falcons are a fatally flawed team. I actually compared it to the end of the Ken Whisenhunt era for the Arizona Cardinals. They just don't seem to be playing with that kind of what's the word I'm looking like. It's almost like they've tuned the coach out. Now, I don't think anything negative of Dan Quinn, but just from people I've talked to and guys I know, that's what it seems like. So while it would seem like the Falcons on paper are an infinitely more talented team, the Cardinals are just a team that wants it more, that's hungrier right now. And so I think we kind of saw that play out in the game. The more talented team was able to come back and things of that nature, but the hungrier team won the game. The team that's playing like, almost like their coach is on the hot seat. Not that Cliff is, anywhere near a hot seat, but, almost like, they're trying to prove that this is the right guy. This is the guy they want. And so to see them pull that out, to see them win a game despite their defense basically not playing the entire second half except for one series, I thought that was big, because those are wins you stack and build on. I know that some have come out and said, oh, that's not a good, win or anything like that. But I mean, this was a team that won 3 games a year ago, and they've already got 2 wins now, and they've got a very winnable game coming up this week. So, as they continue to stack wins, I think that's the biggest thing for them.
Absolutely. Now, in the end, 34-33. They obviously there's concerns, but let's talk about the offensive side of the ball, because this is now 2 weeks in a row where it looks like everything is clicking. There was really, the way Kyler Murray played, the throws that he made, the fact that he wasn't sacked at all, he didn't turn the ball over. As a team, they got over 100 rushing yards. It wasn't super effective. One of the things, like, personally, that I kind of noticed, and everyone was talking about, like, the ground raid or the run raid after their play in Cincinnati, where the running game was just completely dominant. It almost looked, just to me, as I was watching from my view in the press box, that the Cardinals' scheme and game plan, they game planned to pass more and to use, because they used a ton of play action. I think they expected, because of the success that they had in running the ball, I think they anticipated Atlanta gearing up for a rushing attack and used their advantage to that. In some ways, maybe they outsmarted themselves a little bit, but at the same time, with the offensive production and the efficiency they had, it seemed to work, because they used a ton of play action on Sunday.
They did, and one of the things that you've seen is that this team is really kind of it's a team that has holes, and then it's a team that has a strength or two. And it's hard to get everything to kind of work in symmetry together. So when they're able to do that and able to really, I hate to go back to it, just stack wins, no matter who it's against or what's going on, you have to be excited about that, no matter who's on the losing end of those things. And yes, the teams they've beat are combined 1-11, 1-10. So,
yeah, but you play who you play, you get wins where you're supposed to get wins, and you go from there. What was for you? What was the thing you were most impressed about, whether it be a player, something that happened? What was the most impressive part of their offensive performance for you?
I think the most impressive part was the way they continue to kind of expand the roles of everybody on this offense. I mean, you and I have talked about it. I don't think that David Johnson is, and obviously he's not 100%, but I don't think he's the runner he was, 3 or 4 years ago, but he's still, a great receiving option. Chase Edmonds is the more dynamic, kind of quick runner. Larry Fitzgerald is really just a kind of security blanket possession guy right now. I think 3 of his catches were on third down for first down conversions. So those, that's kind of where he is in his career, which is fine. And then you have guys like Keyshawn Johnson, Trent Sherfield, Damiere Byrd, that are all kind of one trick guys. Keyshawn's really kind of, I've compared him. Keyshawn is kind of like Larry right now. Like he's 36-year-old Larry in a 23-year-old body. Like that's kind of his skill set. Trent made a spectacular catch along the sideline, kind of making up for that drop he had a couple weeks ago against the Panthers, I think it was. Damiere is kind of looking to be this team's J.J. Nelson in the same kind of way. And so I think just the way that they were able to get all of them involved. I mean, they talk about it on the broadcast. Kyler Murray was 10 for 11, and his one, incompletion in the first, 3 drives was when Fitz missed the hot call. And so it was, it was an incompletion, but that's a ball that if Fitz, gets the call right, that's, a catch for 15, 20 yards, maybe a touchdown. And then you look at kind of the emergence of Max Williams, and all of a sudden he's become a threat. He's not ever going to be Jason Kelce or George Kittle, but he's kind of a Jason Witten type, again, security blanket. And that's what really impressed me. I mean, we just basically named everybody but Andy Isabella and Charles Clay on offense, and Charles Clay had a reception for a first down on a fourth down call. Isabella was the only one that didn't touch the ball, and he was wide open on a touchdown on a play that had him running a jet sweep motion. I mean, this team literally used every asset they have on offense, and to me, that's the most impressive thing because I've talked about it. From just a pure talent standpoint, they don't have a ton. They have nice players, but they don't have a ton of talent. And to get 400 plus yards of offensive production, 4 touchdowns, just everything that they were able to do in that game. It's impressive when you kind of just look at the personnel and then you throw in the offensive line. Like they're creating dynamic plays. They're creating sustainable drives and things that can be replicated without having what I would call, a ton of NFL talent.
And for me, Kyler was, if you look at where he is in his development, that's 6 games in, you can see the strides that he's made. Obviously, he's still going to make mistakes, but he really didn't make any against the Falcons. You look at the fact that, he was sacked 20 times in the first 4 games, and about half of those felt like they were on him. Now, what's been great about those sack numbers is that there hasn't been a single sack where you're going, ooh, you're just cringing at the contact that he took. He's seen everything coming. Most of the time he was falling down. And then again, most of the time, those sacks were not because of offensive line play. And then he had a couple of turnovers, a few forced throws. This week, he put it all together. He was commanding the offense. He was making checks at the line of scrimmage. He was getting the ball out of his hands quickly. He made deep throws. I had the caveat, of course, this is against an Atlanta Falcons defense. It's bad to begin with, and they were missing Desmond Trufant, their best cornerback, and that hasn't been able to generate really any pressure of any sort. And so it's kind of like what Deshaun Watson was saying. The Atlanta defense is kind of ideal to play against because you can attack them in the seam, you can attack them in the middle of the field, you can attack them on the borders. In the passing game, you can kind of do anything schematically and find success. But he was accurate. He made deep throws. He basically was the entire package. He wasn't sacked. He didn't turn the ball over. It was just a fine performance. And the outcome, how it ended up having the missed extra point and they got to just run out the clock, there was no doubt in my mind Matt Bryant makes that extra point with 1:53 left. The Cardinals were going to move down the field and get at least the winning field goal. But the way
there was going to be and there's 1:56,
it was
58
1:53
left.
They had, so it was plenty of time to get within Zane Gonzalez's range. Or it would have been a repeat. So instead of 34-33, it probably would have been 37-34. But it was just everything about Kyler Murray's game said. It validated it. He didn't have gaudy rushing yards like he did against the Bengals, but you look at the one game microcosm to see all the progress he's made, and then you look at the big picture, what he's accomplished in terms of team history. They've never had a quarterback of that caliber as a rookie, as I wrote about on Tuesday, sort of the records that he's on pace for. He right now is on pace for over 4,200 yards passing, which not only would far surpass the rookie record that Matt Leinart had in 2006 of a little more than 2,500 yards, that would put him number 4 in team history, period, with only names, the only players who have had more than 4,200 yards in a season: Carson Palmer, Kurt Warner, and Neil Lomax. You put Kyler Murray in that category, he in 1 year, and obviously he's still got to do it, but he's on pace for over 4,200 yards passing. And to do that as a rookie would be phenomenal considering the history of the Cardinals. And so it's just, there's more and more reason to be super excited about what is left this season, especially considering that it really looks like, for me, that the offense has finally clicked. They found their rhythm. Not only are they moving the ball between the 20s, against Atlanta, they dominated in the red zone. Now, here's the thing this week. They're playing a Giants team who have a very, very bad defense, so we should see more of the same. So we should be able to stack on this. Now, the running back play, David Johnson, he had 34 yards rushing, as did Chase Edmonds. Both had 34. DJ on 12 carries, Chase on 5. They both had 30. DJ had another 68 yards through the air or receiving. So he had, for the fourth time in 6 games, he's had over 100 yards from scrimmage. Now, his rushing production is down, and the 2 games where he didn't, so the games 2 and 3 when he didn't get the 100 yards, you can simply look. It was not a product of his play nearly as much as it was his usage. Is there really anything that we can complain about David Johnson's performance? Right now he's number 10 in scrimmage yards. He's on pace for 1,600 scrimmage yards this year. That's not quite 2016, but he's still producing at a high rate. And no, he hasn't been nearly as dynamic in the running game, but let's be perfectly honest, his usage has not been the same in the running game as it was in 2016. I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Drink. I made the comparison to you offline, and so I'll kind of say what I've thought. He reminds me of Larry Sinners at this point, and that's not a bad thing. Like, I'm not being a negative person when I say that. I mean, Larry Sinners was a 1,000-yard receiver out of the backfield. He's a guy that could gain 600-700 yards on the ground. Kind of a between the tackles runner at this point. And that's okay. That's what he is. And there's nothing wrong or negative about that. He's not a dynamic runner anymore, but he is a complete game changer, as a receiver. And that makes him valuable. That makes him, a guy that can consistently, be on the field, whether it's in, passing or running situations. Like, he's a guy that you can consistently use in different personnel groups and formations. And that's what I've seen the most with Cliff, is he's really not afraid to go kind of off the wall and do things differently. So I think this is an offense that's really finding its rhythm and way to a point where they're getting close to being really good. And again, I can't stress this enough. And they're going to have bad games. I mean, leave no doubt about that. Their games after New York with New Orleans and San Francisco are going to be rough to watch. But the fact that they're able to do this against mediocre or bad teams is such a huge improvement from last year's product, where it was just always bad, that you have to be excited as this is pushing forward, because as they start to get in more talent, as they start to, as guys start to develop, they're going to be very dynamic in a number of ways.
So what we see right now, and this is after it took a while to get going, the Cardinals are now in the top 10 offensively in terms of offensive production. And they are, I think, 17 in scoring. This is roughly, now this is just after 6 games, kind of what I thought they would be. And being that they've made some improvements early, now maybe this evens out a little bit as their schedule comes in. They hit their divisional games against teams like Seattle, because they still have another game against Seattle. They got 2 against San Francisco. They got New Orleans. The Cleveland defense has been good sometimes. The Steelers' defense has been promising at times, and so there's still some defense. But I thought this team would actually by the end of the year be a top 10 defense in production and probably middle of the road in points. Which, hey, everything about this year offensively. So we can pin in this. We can say, okay, Cliff Kingsbury has been a success, at least early on, because he was brought in to fix the offense. And what are we seeing? We're seeing huge offensive production, very good offensive production, and so they're an exciting product to watch. They're not winning a lot of games yet, and there's lots of problems defensively, which we're going to talk about. But hey, this is exactly what we wanted to see. They're on track. This is exactly what he was hired to do, and it's proving to be the right move thus far. I like what one of your guys, Blake, one of your writers, who also does the Revenge of the Bird podcast, he has compared Kingsbury more to Kyle Shanahan than he has to Sean McVay, even though everyone keeps talking about Sean McVay. Because of his creativity in the running game, which is what Shanahan's been able to do, and to do it with lots of different personnel. If you look at what he did with the Falcons, you look at what he's done with the 49ers and Kyle Juszczyk, he's very creative in the running game. And that's the thing that's kind of been impressive. Even though they haven't been hugely productive, the running game is better. Adding Kyler Murray helps. But it's really kind of across the board. They're better on third down. They're scoring points now. They're more effective in the red zone. They're scoring. They're getting scoring drives. They're not punting as often. They're gaining more yards per drive. Basically, every metric you want to look at, they're better.
Yeah, and efficiency is the biggest thing for this team. They need to be a team that, as we'll get to, limits how often the defense is on the field. And the other thing that they've cut down on, and they've made some, Murray's bailed them out a couple times. The offensive line has played better. Cliff has schemed better to kind of overcome some of the deficits along the offensive line. But one of the biggest things I think is that they're not setting themselves into negative positions. So you're not seeing a lot of 2nd and 12s, 3rd and long situations. You're seeing a lot of, 3rd and 6 at most, or 3rd and shorts. So what they're doing is they're being on time on their offense, because we saw even kind of not late in the game, but in the second half, they started to have those those mess ups where all of a sudden they're in 2nd and 15, and now it's 3rd and 11, and now all of a sudden, the kind of warts show themselves of what this team has. And so that all kind of, when you can push that away and you can stay on time and on rhythm offensively, and you give yourself manageable third downs, you're going to be a productive offense. And that's just, to me, that's the most exciting thing, is this team is going to get better. They need a true kind of number one alpha receiver, and they probably need another running back. I know some people aren't going to agree with me, and that's fine, but but when you look at it, they're doing all of this, and they're lacking talent. And so it's just like, it's that kind of tip of the iceberg where you're like, holy cow, like next year or 2 years from now, this could be something that's not just good, but that could be special. And we know, and I can't reiterate this enough. There's going to be games where they're not good. There's going to be Carolina games where they're under 300 yards of total offense. It's going to happen. It's the NFL. The Bills held the Patriots under 300 yards of offense. Like, these things are going to happen. But in the end, it's about the long-term look. And as Jess hit on, 6 games in, the long-term offensively looks fantastic.
Coming up next on the Rise Up C Red podcast, we're going to
change gears and react to the defense, which hasn't been very good so far. That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. And defensively, we've got some problems. Now, we will have to say that it is obvious that talent-wise, Atlanta has offensive weapons. They have a top quarterback. They have a talented running back in Devontae Freeman, even though his stats, it's kind of like Joe Mixon in the Cincinnati. Very talented, just the production hasn't been there. In fact, their running game felt like their running back situation almost felt exactly like the Cardinals. Devontae Freeman has been disappointing, hasn't been productive like David Johnson, and they've got a guy in Ito Smith who's kind of like their Chase Edmonds, who's been productive in limited work, and everyone wants to see him get more work. Devontae Freeman had a solid game. We all know about the receivers they have. They've got 3 very quality receivers. They've got a very good tight end. And defensively, the Cardinals really could do nothing. They gave up over 100 yards on the ground. Matt Ryan just picked them apart. Picked them actually apart. He had, 6 total incomplete, 30 of 36 for the game, and 2 of those incompletions were throwaways. He had 4 touchdown passes and 4 legitimate incompletions. And they could do basically, the Cardinals did 0 to stop them. And it was almost to the point where the Cardinals offense, which played so well, it was almost to where if they didn't score in every possession, you felt that they were going to lose.
Well, and the frustrating part was, in the first half, they came up with key stops. I think it's highlighting a couple things. One, their defense is incredibly, incredibly shallow. They have very little to basically no depth defensively. Outside of maybe the defensive line, but kind of like the receiving core, they have a lot of guys that are not bad, but they don't have really an alpha. And that's, again, that's just part of Darius Fallon issue, Robert Kimbuche busting, all of that plays into that situation. But the problem becomes schematically they're soft in the secondary, and even though they try to be aggressive up front, they're soft up front. And so you have to be either ultra aggressive in the secondary to make up for a bad pass rush, or you have to be really, really good up front to cover for bad, or in this case, I think young corners. I mean, Kevin Peterson has, I think, surpassed Byron Murphy as the best pure cover guy on the team. Murphy's still the better overall player by leaps and bounds, but just from a pure coverage running with type standpoint, I think Peterson's playing really well right now, but he's also not having to see Julio Jones. He's not having to see, Tyler Boyd, things like that. So, but the other issue becomes outside of their 1 sack a game type thing, we're not seeing a whole lot from the pass rush. We're not seeing a whole lot from Chandler Jones and Terrell Suggs and creating disruption and getting the quarterback off his spot. I mean, basically, anytime a quarterback drops back against the Arizona Cardinals, they're going to have 3 to 4 seconds to throw the ball. And that's a problem when you have soft coverage in the secondaries, when you have a lot of young guys in the secondary, or a lot of young guys and then one old guy in Tremaine Brock. But, think about the Cardinals secondary. They have a rookie, corner.
Yeah, they've got a rookie corner. They've got 2 rookie safeties who are alternating.
They have a
Baker, he's a
third-year
legitimate
safety,
player.
but he never has played this position before either.
Right.
Like, he's never done this before. So, and then you have Kevin Peterson, who's played in like 3 NFL games before coming here, so he's virtually a rookie. And then you have, oh, by the way, 31-year-old Tremaine Brock, who is, I mean, if Tremaine Brock is your 4th corner, you feel pretty good. When Tremaine Brock is your, pseudo 1 or 2 corner, that's when you're like, oh. And so, I mean, that's just kind of the problem right now is that they're not getting anything from their pass rush, and then their secondary is young and playing incredibly soft schematically, and it's just basically, and I wrote about it all week. It's basically a 7-on-7 game. Jess, your son plays, high school football. You've been to 7-on-7 passing leagues. That's honestly what it looks like. I mean, it's basic, and in 7-on-7, the offense is always at the advantage because the quarterback has, they set a set amount of time for him to throw. But basically, what the quarterbacks against the Cardinals are doing is they're just counting to 5 Mississippi, and then they know they have to get rid of the ball. And so that, that's causing issues in the secondary. I don't know. I mean, obviously Patrick Peterson coming back is going to have a positive influence in the coverage aspect. Anytime you get a all-pro corner, it's going to be a positive thing. But even Patrick Peterson being great isn't going to change the pass rush. It isn't going to change the other guys having to cover for 4 to 5 seconds, and that's where issues will begin to creep up.
One of the things that I've kind of struggled with is Chandler Jones. He's getting sacks, and he's consistently getting half to sack to 1 to sack. So he's going to end up, like last year, he's going to end up with 13 sacks, 14 sacks. But in terms of overall impact, and even with his forced fumbles, it's coming in 1 or 2 plays as opposed to consistent disruption. Whatever the reason is, it doesn't look like Jones is creating much pass rush or pressures. Those analytic numbers where you got to love pressures. Jones isn't creating the pressures. Suggs isn't consistently creating pressure, and so it never looks like the opposing quarterbacks, have any problem. And they're not getting inside push. You're not getting an outside push, except for now and again. Very, very rarely do, at least Matt Ryan, he didn't have to move his feet at all, really. Which, and maybe the case is Vance Joseph knows the limitations of his defense and is simply trying to mitigate the big plays. And so you end up, for some reason, with guys that end up pretty open. They're not like wide open. They're not wide open down the field most of the time, but it seems like 7-8 yards to 10 to 15 yards is kind of easy, and they kind of pick their spots to attack, to hopefully make plays, or you wait for the opposing team to make a mistake or get a negative play in the running game or a penalty, which puts them behind the sticks. There really hasn't been any part of the defense that you go, yeah, this is good. I mean, there's players that you're happy to see. Like Byron Murphy's play hasn't been perfect, but you like because he has flashes where he's incredibly physical. The time he just dislodged the ball from Julio Jones was something beautiful to watch. Hassan has really been up and down with coverage. The defensive line has been really meh. The outside pass rush has been minimal overall. They've had forced fumbles, but it's just they're not getting consistent pressure. So there's just really nothing about this defense that you can really hang your hat on and say, they're not keeping teams in the game right now, but maybe that was sort of the plan. Kingsbury, it blows me away. The way he talks, he is unconcerned with how teams are coming back on the Cardinals. He said, hey, Andy Dalton, he's a veteran quarterback. They're hungry. Their backs are against the wall. They've got talent. They're going to come back. I'm not concerned. It's like he is just worried about the offense. It's almost, for Cardinals fans, for those who follow basketball as well, he's Mike D'Antoni, I think, to where if the offense is doing what it's supposed to do, it almost doesn't matter what the defense does. And if the offense is as efficient as it is, you just need the defense to do something here or there.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. And we joke about it, but this offense has turned the ball over 4 times, and they've only caused 3 turnovers. And that's the biggest issue. Honestly, that's the biggest issue, is like, you can't ask an offense to score every drive. And this goes back to Cliff's college days, and I don't want to get into that, but like that's what was happening at Texas Tech. I mean, they had days where they were putting up 60 points and losing. And so, this is the NFL. This isn't college. You're not having to recruit kids to go to Lubbock, Texas. You're not recruiting against Texas and Oklahoma and even, TCU and Texas A&M. You pick your players. You get to hire your defensive coordinator. Like, that's the thing, is this is a team that should, from a talent aspect, be able to compete. And I understand that they have a lot of holes defensively, and so that's why they're struggling to compete. But that shouldn't be a concern for the long term. And I wonder, and I'm not saying it is, but I do wonder if that's kind of what Cliff is, how he's addressing it. As I'm not worried about it in the sense of, like, this is year 1. We've focused really heavily on the offense in the draft. We focused on fixing the offense in a lot of ways. And we're seeing that, year 2 and 3, that's where we'll start to build the defense up and kind of begin to see this team be a complete team.
Coming up next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, we're actually going to talk about the part of the defense that it seems everyone is waiting for, and that's Patrick Peterson. He is back this week. We'll talk about how he affects the defense moving forward. That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Patrick Peterson returns from suspension. He was in the building on Monday. He will be at practice Wednesday, which means a roster move is going to happen. But, it feels like the Cardinals defensively have been in a holding power. Let's wait till Patrick gets back. Wait till Patrick picks. When Patrick's back, things will be better. And maybe that's what Vance Joseph's been doing. How do you see him impacting the Cardinals defensive unit overall? How much better will the Cardinals be as a unit by simply having Pat back on the field?
I think the first thing you look at is that they finally have one guy that can cover consistently. And I don't mean that as a shot to Byron, Kevin Peterson, and Tremaine Brock. They've done admirable jobs. Byron's a rookie, kind of adjusting to the league. Again, Peterson's super young. Tremaine Brock, again, if he's your 4th corner, you're in a good spot. So getting Pat back, you have a true cornerback 1 now. You slide. I don't know how the rotation is going to go. I'm not going to pretend to know, actually.
I don't know if it's going to change much, because Cliff said now Brock can primarily play in the slot, but here's the thing. He had been playing primarily in the slot. Again, he was playing in the slot anytime there were 3 cornerbacks on the field. So I don't know if his role will change, if he will be cornerback 2 and slide over, and then so I can't tell yet whether it's going to be Brock getting 100% of the snaps and Murphy coming in as the Peterson, or if Brock will play the limited snaps coming in just a nickel. Whatever it is, it's going to be Brock playing in nickel.
Right, and so that's the thing, is you'll probably have Murphy in, and now you limit Brock snaps a little more, which I think, and I hate saying stuff like this. Right, exactly. That's good for Tremaine Brock too.
Yes.
I mean, let's be honest. Like, dude is old,
And he really only wanted to play the slot anyway. Like his comments in the training camp is like, I'd rather just focus on playing in the slot.
Right. And so like that's the biggest thing when you look at this is that, these are guys that's where their strength lies. When you're 31 and you know your limitations at this point, you've been in NFL, been in the NFL for a decade now. Like you're an older guy, kind of who you are and what you are as a player, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, and so, if Brock is down to 70% of the snaps instead of having to play 90 to 100, that's a big thing for them. If Kevin Peterson is your dime back, all of a sudden that's really good. So I think in that sense it's going to help because I just think it bumps everybody down one spot. And that's, we talked about it. Like Byron Murphy probably right now is a really, really good third cornerback. So when you ask him to be a number 2 cornerback, he's probably good. But when you're asking him to be the number 1, it's just not fair. That's not his skill set yet. He's not ready for that, demand. So he slides down to your 2. Now you're like, oh, okay, this is going to, bump his play up even further. You look at Brock again. Ideally, in the perfect world, what they expected to happen was that Brock was going to kind of bump down to your 4th corner to be your guy that comes in dime situations, plays 25 to 30% of the snaps, and like this is a veteran that knows his job, that knows how to do his job well, and he's not going to get beat. Or not that he's not going to get beat, that he's not going to hurt you. And so those are the things that Patrick coming back do, is that now, Brock's probably playing twice as, like in the ideal situation want him to, but he's also playing, a third less snaps now. So instead of 66 snaps in the game, maybe he's getting, 50 to 45 snaps. And that's just better because that's asking him to do less, and that's where he is in his career. And then if and we haven't heard anything, nobody's talked about anything yet, but if Robert Alford is starting, to slowly come back, all that's going to do is make everything even better, right? Like you get Peterson back this week, who knows? Maybe you go win a road game in New York, and you get to 500, and then you've got a really tough game in New Orleans the next week. But then maybe you can get Brock back for that Halloween night, Thursday night football game against San Francisco, right? Like that would be huge. And all of a sudden you're playing the best team in the NFC West. Who saw that coming? On Thursday night football, and all of a sudden you have your full set of defensive backs. And that's kind of be what changes things, is that now you're hoping that having talent on the back end is going to free up Vance to be more creative in the front, and he's going to be able to send 5 and 6 guys consistently because he knows he's got 3 guys that are good to great corners. He's got a really solid Budda Baker, and then a developing Deontay and Jalen Thompson back there. Like all of a sudden the secondary, which is a huge liability right now, becomes a strength. So it's just kind of that first step in that process.
Now, how do you see the defensive coverage issues fixing? Obviously, Pat allows you to sort of almost erase one guy. Does that mean it's going to solve the tight end problems? I mean, if we look at historically, Vance Joseph's defense, Todd Bowles' defense, they both have problems with tight ends. Will the tight end problem? I don't think it'll go away completely, simply because of the fact that you've got guys like Jordan Hicks and Hassan Reddick, and Hassan Reddick, who has all the athleticism and he's able to run with everyone, still. I mean,
learning how to cover from the linebacker spot. Yeah.
Yes, he's got the potential. He just hasn't reached that But should it be? Can we expect it to go from ridiculous to just frustrating?
Yeah, I think it'll still be frustrating, and this week could be ridiculous. I mean, let's be fair. Evan Ingram is one of the probably 7 or 8 best tight ends in the NFL from an athleticism standpoint. I mean, when you look at who the Cardinals have played this year, the one game that sticks out in the super negative right now is TJ Hawkinson. And that's really the game where you look at it and you go, oh, that was bad. Oh, that was bad. Because, and I'm not trying to knock Hawk or anything like that. I wasn't a huge fan of the pick itself. So people that follow my draft stuff just know that, you know, they're probably thinking, oh, he's just taking a shot. But, like, literally, if you take out the Cardinals game, take it out completely, Hawkinson has 9 catches for 56 yards on the season and 1 touchdown. So in the Cardinals game, he had 6 for 131 and 1 touchdown. The rest of the season, he has 9 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown. So that's the bad game when you look at it, because Will Dissly's putting up massive numbers as a tight end. You know, Mark Andrews has been on fire as a tight end. Austin Hooper has been a fantastic tight end. Greg Olsen was another game where you're like, oh, that wasn't, you know, great. Because, you know, but Olsen's had a couple big games, especially with Kyle Allen back there, you know, kind of being the safety net, you know, safety blanket for him. He's only got 2 TDs on the season, so that's the negative. But, you know, he had the 110-yard game, and then he had a 52-yard game last week in their win. So, I mean, that's, you know, if you want to say that's not the worst, I can vouch for that. But, you know, they, for the most part, shut down the Bengals tight ends. So it's not as though they've played bad tight ends and given up a ton of yards outside of Hawkinson. You know, Hooper is a guy that's on pace for a ton of yards this year. I think they gave up like 40 more yards than his average. So that, you know, that's obviously not ideal, but it is what it is. Dissly is a guy that we've seen. Now he's out, I believe, but he's a guy that, you know, is a real difference maker at the tight end position. So, you know, it's going to be a problem because they're going to see Evan Ingram now. And Ingram, again, he's borderline great receiving tight end. So that's going to be an issue this week that they're going to have to figure out a way to overcome, because guess what? You have George Kittle twice coming up. So you better start to figure something out, because the tight end situation is not going to go away from a talent standpoint the rest of the year.
Coming up next on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, we're going to move on and talk about the NFC West. What does that division look like right now after 6 weeks? And how does it change after a pair of trades for cornerbacks? That's coming up next on the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, the Rise Up Sea Red podcast. We're back on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. The NFC West is kind of curious. We all expected the Cardinals to be an up-and-coming team, which it appears that they are. Well, some expected them to be god-awful. They haven't been god-awful. That's good. However, the Seattle Seahawks are sneaky good because they haven't dominated, but they're sitting at 5-1, and they're 3-0 on the road. They're playing extremely well in all phases, and Russell Wilson is having an incredible year. And yet, the 2 surprises are, one, the fading LA Rams at 3-3, and the 5-0 49ers. I think we don't need to talk about the Cardinals. We talk to the Cardinals all the time. Is the success of the 49ers sustainable, one? And are the Rams on the verge of a disappointing year? Or will they turn it around? What do you see?
Well, as of this recording, the Rams had just traded 2 first-round picks for Jalen Ramsey, while also trading Marcus Peters to the Ravens. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So I was, texting with some friends about this, and the interesting thing is that the Rams continue to go all in. They're basically saying, like, look, we're in this window with Jared Goff, Todd Gurley's knee, obviously the best defensive player in the NFL and Aaron Donald. So we want to stack as much talent as we can. So we're going to go for it. We're going to go cheap, maybe not in a good way along the offensive line, and with our linebackers and the rest of our secondary. I mean, they're going young and kind of or young or veteran. They're kind of mix and matching that. Eric Weddle's there right now. And so I understand what the Rams are doing, because this is almost like Chandler Jones trade, right? Like, we're going to go for it. We're going to see if that's the piece that'll get us back on track, push us over the top, type thing. The 49ers are kind of where the Cardinals are were kind of where the Cardinals are right now, where, all right, we've got our quarterback, and obviously they traded and paid Jimmy Garoppolo, so they got their quarterback. They're building the offensive line. Obviously, Joe Staley is a Hall of Famer. He's been injured, but he's kind of been a rock there since you and I were born. And then they drafted Mike McGlinchey, and to the 49ers credit, like, they drafted multiple first-round offensive linemen that haven't worked out, and they just keep going to the well. Solomon Thomas hasn't really turned out to be the player everyone expected him to be, but they got Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner on that defensive line. They've just continued to find ways to stack talent, and then you kind of look at and then they piece together free agents. They go and get Weston Richburg, pay him a ton of money to be their center. Then in free agency this year, they go and get Quan Alexander and pay him a ton of money to be their, weak side linebacker and kind of be the guy on defense. They took a chance on Richard Sherman. So they're a team that has, they've built through the draft in a lot of spots, and then they've taken chances in other spots, and some of it's just dumb luck too. I mean, George Kittle was a 5th-round pick, and now he's an All-Pro. That's just, you don't plan for that. Matt Breida was an undrafted free agent, and he's on pace for like 1,300 yards rushing. Like, he's just been a freak. So you kind of he's averaging. Breida's averaging almost 6 yards a carry. Like, his play is just absurd. And then they trade for D4, do different things. We're seeing kind of the blueprint of what the Cardinals need to follow to do that. Now, I do have one question about the 49ers, and it always kind of plays itself out in the end, and we've seen it in bowls most of the time, but especially in the playoffs. The best quarterbacks usually win, right? And if you were to ask me, and my opinion doesn't mean a whole lot, but if you were to ask me, I would say Jimmy Garoppolo is either the 4th best starter in the NFC West. I think you and I would agree Russell Wilson is the clear-cut best quarterback in the NFC West.
Yes.
And so that, even though the Seahawks are a game behind the 49ers, and I think the 49ers defense is improved, especially that front 4, and we can call it front 7 with Quan. I think they're improved and good. I don't think that they're good enough to beat Russell, and I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is good enough to overcome that, a la and all the Rams last year and the Patriots. So
and
that's
they have some very talented defenses coming along. So
right.
they've had,
but they also, their next game is against the Redskins, so they're going to be 6-0 going into a game at home against Carolina before they come to Arizona on Halloween. So that's the thing, is like they could be 7-0 coming into a Thursday night kind of trap game for the Cardinals or for the Niners, where it's a division game, but you have a chance to be 7-0. You have a ton of time off for your first home matchup with the Seattle Seahawks, who will probably, we haven't even talked about the Seahawks, who probably will be, they play the Ravens. They could lose that one, but it's in Seattle. And then they go to Atlanta. We're expecting that to be a win, right? And then they host Tampa and Bruce Arians. So at worst, you're looking at, 7-2 for the Seahawks, maybe 8-1 coming into that matchup with 49ers. That's a big deal when you kind of just look at it that way, is that the Cardinals, while it sucks to have to take on the 49ers in a short week, it could be a game where the 49ers are just kind of overconfident. They're coming into a team that's, we're hoping that they're 4-1. Who knows? Maybe they steal one on the road against a great New Orleans team and they're 4-3-1. But the way the NFC West is shaping up to me in Seattle, just because I always buy the quarterback as kind of the decider, and so when teams are close, 5-1 and 5-0, that's basically as razor thin as you can get. I'm going to always err on the side of the best quarterback when teams are close.
Obviously, now for me, because the Rams were. People were talking 13 wins, 14 wins coming into this year. I did have one concern, and it is the problem. It's the fact that they went from having the best offensive line in football a year ago to now. And Andrew Whitworth is solid, but they lost Roger Saffold. They got rid of John Sullivan, and one of the guys who, Brian Noteboom, who was impressive, who'd been impressing for them, he just tore his MCL and ACL. They were going with unproven guys thus far in the league to replace solid players. Add to that, Rod Havenstein not having a good year this year. So the offensive line is downgraded. They're playing far from the top of the league. And Jared Goff is a good quarterback. He's the problem is for the Rams, Jared Goff, even though he's got some athleticism, think Carson Palmer. If he's got people at his feet, he's not nearly the quarterback, and he's going to turn the ball over some. When he has time, he's as good as anyone. And with him and McVay, and then you add to that Todd Gurley's not been 100%, it was ripe for a year in which they would, for lack of a better word, disappoint, because people were expecting them to bounce back and be completely dominant. Now, we all know about what teams who have the Super Bowl hangover do. It feels like the Falcons are still hungover on that 28-3 lead that they lost, that they can't get it out of their head, and they're just spiraling. The Rams they were incredibly fortunate last year with their health, and now they're coming back to the average where people are getting hurt, and now they're 3-3. I don't think they're gonna fall apart, but they might be out of the playoff picture at the end of the year. Ultimately, I think they're going to win 9 to... They could win anywhere between 8 and 10 games, but that might not be enough this year.
No, and that's the thing, is the way, we're not to go completely NFL-centric here, but, the way that the NFC North is shaking out, like, you could have 4 teams with 8 or more wins in that division. I mean, Detroit's 2-2-1, and both their losses are like heartbreaking last-second losses to the 5-1 Packers and 4. The Minnesota Vikings seem to have found whatever they were missing. And all of a sudden now they're sit at 4-2, and they're playing incredibly well. And so like an 8-9 wins from LA, maybe that sneaks you into the playoffs, but not right now. I mean, right now you're looking at this. It's going to be interesting because I think if you 3 weeks ago, everybody would have said, "Oh, the NFC East is the best division of football or going to be the toughest division of football to call with Philly and Dallas." They're both 3-3. Like both of those teams look really average, whereas that the NFC North looks like it's just going to be a dogfight to the end. And then, I mean, we haven't even talked, because we're going to talk about them next week, the New Orleans Saints. I mean, they're 5-1 without Drew Brees. I mean, they were embarrassed on national TV in week 2 and lost their quarterback. So not only were they beat like a drum on that TV, they lost their quarterback, and since then they haven't missed a beat. They're 5-1. So yeah, I mean, this was kind of the swirling perfect storm that was happening, right, for Los Angeles, right, for the picking. I think most of us just assumed it was going to be Seattle. Well, Seattle, I mean, they're 5-1. Really, we're going to nitpick or complain about that? They're 5-1. They look fantastic. Nobody saw the jump that the 49ers were going to make. Nobody was ready for that jump this year. And
finally the team this year that people thought they'd be the last two.
Right. And I mean, and you look at their right. And you look at their wins. I mean, the Buccaneers win doesn't look really good. BA looked like he's cooked kind of at this point. The Bengals win, obviously, the Cardinals have one of those. That's not really that impressive right now. The Steelers win, actually, like, that's the one that made you raise your eyebrow, because that was against Mason Rudolph, right? Like, you're like, and they barely won at home. And so that was the start where everybody's like, team's for real. And then all of a sudden they just blow out. I mean, just completely obliterate a Cleveland Browns team that everybody had a lot of expectations for. And then they just next week, or I guess it was 2 weeks because they had their bye week, but they come back and they just, they look like the physically superior team to the Los Angeles. I mean, they held Jared Goff to 78-yard passing. I mean, I'm really glad it happened early in the season, because I'm not trying to be rude, but can you imagine the fan outcry if that was Kyler Murray?
Oh boy.
I mean, going 13 for 24 for 78 yards in a game. I mean, that would have been a nightmarish result for the Cardinals. And so when you just kind of look at it, you kind of go through the whole thing. This NFC West in general it looks like the Cardinals are in a spot where they're a year away from competing, or maybe two with the way that the 49ers are rounding out. But that's okay, because they're holding pace with the Rams. I mean, the Rams are 3-3. The Cardinals are 2-3-1. So a win this week for the Cardinals keeps them within a game of the Rams. And obviously the Rams aren't the standard right now that they were last year, but they are the standard of, hey, the Cardinals need to at least be competing to not be last in the division, right? Like that was the thing this year, is that they weren't the worst team in the NFC West. Even if they had the worst record, that they were at least competitive, and they looked like they belonged in the same class as the Rams and the Seahawks and the 49ers. And so for me thus far, in a shocking way, it's not the 49ers they're chasing, it's the Rams. It's almost like the Rams and 49ers just, kind of flip-flop positions. And so now you're saying, hey, like if you can keep pace with the Rams, that's a solid season, to be maybe competing for that third spot in the NFC West. And nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear, oh, you're competing not to be last. But if you look at that from the jump from last year, that's a huge, huge deal.
Coming next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, we're going to take a break and we're going to talk briefly as the trade deadline approaches. Are there anything that the Cardinals should do? That's coming next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Trade deadline's coming up. The biggest piece has been moved. Jalen Ramsey on the way to the Rams. Trent Williams, still a Redskin. Patrick Peterson, still a Cardinal. Even though the Cardinals aren't trading Peterson, his name has come up. Are there any moves the Cardinals should do? Let's start with Trent Williams. Obviously, he's a great left tackle. He's going to cost a lot to get. He's going to cost a lot to pay. And his age makes you wonder. But he's a clear upgrade over DJ Humphries, even though Humphries has been fine and healthy. Is a Trent Williams trade worth making?
I mean, the question and kind of what you have to look at for that is the idea that what is the long-term plan? And so Williams has an injury history. We need to be, aware of that. He has missed, I don't think he's played 16 games in a while. He hasn't played more than 14 games since 2015. So I want to first say this. There's zero questions that just when on the field that Trent Williams is better than any offensive lineman the Cardinals have probably, I would venture to say, ever had while in Arizona. However, we've, on this podcast, throughout Twitter, our sites, fans everywhere, the complaint has always been Keim's infatuation with injury-prone players. So your question is kind of two-part answered. Are you willing to take a risk on a 31-year-old left tackle that wants a lot of money, that is still playing at an elite level, because he is. I mean, he's one of the 5 best tackles in the NFL. Are you willing to do that? That's what the question is. He was an all-pro in 16 and 17. So, this is a guy it's not like the game's passed him by.
Then he's been a Pro Bowler every year since 2012.
Right. And so that is the first question. The second question is, are you willing to wear the egg on your face if and when an injury occurs for a guy that has played since 2015, 14 games, 12 games, 10 games, and 13 games. So he's missed at least 2 games a year since he was 27, which is what everybody considers, the NFL prime. That's my question. I think the answer is, one, the Cardinals are not going to do it. So I think we can just, kind of squash that rumor as it is. They're not going to do it because they're going to gamble on a smaller contract for DJ Humphries. Would it be the right move? It's never a bad thing to get an all-pro left tackle, right? Who's going to complain about that? But with the fact that Williams is 31, he wants a 4-year, 60-ish million, 70-ish million dollar deal, and he's not played a full 16 games since 2013. I would say it's not the best use of their assets at this time.
Now, Stephon Diggs, talented receiver. They need a legit number one. Is he?
Diggs is a legit number one. The problem you have is this, and this is always, the question with trades like this. Diggs is going to be 27. So he's just 26 this year. So he'll just be 20. This is his year age 26. So you're trading for a guy at 27 that has. Did they pay him already? Do you remember?
I believe so.
Because that will make it. Let me check real quick. Yeah. So he's 5 years, $72 million. So he's in year 2 of that. I believe it is. Sorry.
Yeah, and his his salary's doable.
Yeah, very palatable. Like this year was his biggest escalator year type thing, and it's signed through his year 29 or age 29 season. So that's the one where you look at and you go, yeah, I think that type of move would make sense. The question would be, are you willing to give up a first round pick? He's had one 1,000-yard season. That was last year, but he had 9 touchdowns last year. Before that, he's played with, let's just be honest, not great quarterbacks in Minnesota. As a rookie, he had 720 yards. His second year, he had 903 yards. Kind of looked like he was on the horizon, and then he topped out last year in the first year with Kirk Cousins. There's a lot of controversy in this season and his kind of attitude towards the team and things of that nature. But I think from a talent perspective, in a fit scheme-wise perspective, he makes a lot of sense. Here's the other thing, though, and something we can't, overlook. He, as well, has never played 16 games in a season. He played in 13 as a rookie, 13 last year, or 13 in 2016, 14 in 17, and he played 15 last year. So I wouldn't say he's injury prone, but again, he's a guy that hasn't played 16 games ever. He's a guy that we know there is a history where he's not, let's put it this way, he's not Larry Fitzgerald in the way he goes about voicing whatever his displeasure or anything like that would be with his usage in an offense. I don't think he's, Odell in terms of that whole thing, but I do think he is a guy that needs to be
based on what we've seen for over the last year. He's Patrick,
right? He's a guy that likes to be looked at. I think that's a great comparison, Jess. Honestly, he's a guy that, one, wants to win, but two, he wants to be involved heavily in the winning. And so for those reasons, if you could guarantee me you're talking a top or, a 17 and on pick, so that they pick 17 or later, I would do it. If you could do it for 2 twos, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But if you're talking about a first this year that is probably going to be a top 10 pick and maybe give you a chance at a CeeDee Lamb or a Jerry Jeudy or even like a Henry Rugg out of Alabama, I would say no. But that's where I stand on that, because his contract is palatable. He's young enough. All of those are positives, but I don't think he's worth the top 10 pick, and that's why I wouldn't do it.
Any other positions worth looking at? I mean, unless you're trading Peterson, we've talked about it. Even for those who are on the trade Peterson boat, it still seems, and it's trending to where he's going to be a lifer as a Cardinal. I believe he will get a contract extension after the season. Whatever issue there was in the front office has been fixed. He's happy with the team, and I think he's happy with the direction of the team, and I think he will be happy with the way he's used defensively. So everything's trending in the right direction. Now, should they try and acquire a safety, a defensive lineman? It doesn't have to be something big, but is there something out there? Is there a player out there who could make an impact and also impact them in the years to come?
I think the only guys you would see available, or maybe like a Leonard Williams who's coming up on free agency type thing, and I'm not sure he's worth more than what he'll probably get in return as a comp pick, third round comp pick for a team that signs him. I mean, that's a tough one. This is a team that clearly needs kind of an alpha along the defensive line. I mean, the Rams just traded for Jalen Ramsey, so I don't really see them being interested in trading Michael Brockers, who's an interesting one. Derek Wolf's 30, and the Denver defense is trending in the right direction. I don't really see anybody that stands out as a potential, hey, go make a deal. Like Eric Armstead is going to be a free agent next year. He would fit wonderfully in this defense.
The 49ers would never make that trade.
Right, exactly. So when it comes to defensive linemen, I just don't see anybody that's going to be worth a pick. I mean, like I said, if you could get a Leonard Williams for a fourth, but I honestly don't see the Jets doing that. I don't think they do that. And you look at the inside backer position, teams like Baltimore, they're not going to trade Patrick Onwuasor, or the Chiefs are probably would probably give away Darren Lee because he's been that bad. So I just don't see anybody that you look at and you go, oh yeah, that's a guy worth trading for, when you're just talking about in terms of just pure talent. So I think this team is going to stand pat, or maybe make a super minor deal for a guy they've already signed type thing, like a Ramik Wilson or something like that. I don't see any kind of game changers coming in through a trade.
Coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, as we wrapped up the show, we're going to talk about the matchup against the New York Giants this coming weekend. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. The Cardinals play the Giants this weekend on the road. A winnable game. Let's kind of look at the Cardinals. The Cardinals are a bad pass defense. The Giants are a bad pass defense. They're a bad defense overall. They are the fifth worst defense in the league in terms of yards allowed, giving up over 400 a game, 412 a game. In terms of points per game, they are 2 spots ahead of the Cardinals. They're giving up over 26, almost 27 points a game. And the problem is, if you look at the offense, they are only producing 18.5 points a game. So they're below average offensively. They have a rookie quarterback, and things might change though this week. Daniel Jones might get back, Saquon Barkley. How much do you see Saquon Barkley affecting this game? Because the Cardinals have definitely not done any, like, they did okay against Kerryon Johnson. They limited Mark Ingram. Are they going to be able to stop Saquon? Or is this going to be another one of those trickle-down things where, with Patrick back, even the run defense improves?
I mean, Saquon's one of those weird guys where you're just not going to stop him. I mean, in 3 games this year, he has 237 yards rushing on only 37 carries. So for people without their calculator out, that's 6.4 yards per attempt. That's against Dallas, Buffalo, who has a fantastic run defense, and part of the game against Tampa. They're just a different team with Saquon, and you've seen that the last 2 weeks. Saquon's been out when Gallman, their lead backup, was out, and all of a sudden, without their ability to run the football, to set up the passing game, they've been stymied completely. I mean, the Vikings, where they were just throttled 28-10, they only had 64 yards rushing, 147 yards passing, so barely over 200 yards of offense against the Patriots. And to be fair, the Vikings and Patriots are probably 2 of the best defenses in the NFL, so they're not the Cardinals. But against the Patriots, they only had 52 yards rushing. You go to a team that's kind of more in line with the Cardinals, defensively speaking, and you're looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were able to hold them to 72 yards rushing. Tampa's worse than Arizona in points against. I know that's really shocking. They're the worst defense against the pass in the NFL. Tampa is, but they do what does Todd Bowles always do? He stops the running game, right? Like, that's what he does. So when you look at it from that perspective, if you shut down the running game of the Giants, you can neutralize their team. The reality is that shutting down Saquon Barkley is virtually impossible, whether it's as a runner or as a receiver. If he's back this week, 85% or better, like, it's going to be nightmarish for the Cardinals defense, and it'll be probably another track meet where they're having to score as much, on every possession as the other team is going to have to, because they're, like you said, their defense isn't going to stop the Cardinals offense.
And there will be some motivation. The Cardinals, there's some former Cardinals. Obviously, James Betcher is their DC. They've got Antoine Bethea. They've got Marcus Golden and his 5 sacks this year. So there's some connections there.
And Olsen Pierre, I'm never going to get that right, and he doesn't play for the Cardinals anymore, so I'm not going to try. But Olsen Pierre is there too.
Elijah Penny as well.
Yeah, and so like you said, there's a heavy influence. But I think the biggest thing for the Cardinals this week is going to be that they're turning on a consistent pace offensively, and it's showing up to where they're playing extremely well, and they're on the offensive side of the ball, and they're creating opportunities for their defense to make plays, and unfortunately the defense just hasn't made any plays yet. So that's what's going to be kind of the key to this game is with Patrick back, are there enough defensive plays made, or is it just going to be another 7-on-7 type of thing where they're
the week they finally force them to get an interception, because they still have 0 interceptions this year?
Well, and Daniel Jones really wants you to get one. I mean, he's handing them out like Halloween candy. I mean, he's thrown 6 interceptions on the season so far. He's not playing, extremely well, but he's been super hampered, obviously, by injuries. Obviously, Barkley, Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, their number one receiver. Like their top three guys have all been out at some point, and then all were out in either partial games or the entire game against the Patriots this week, where they basically the Giants basically punted that game. They basically said, like, look, we know what's going to happen, whether we're full strength or not. So we're not going to run Evan Ingram out there. We're not going to have Sterling Shepard out there. We're not going to have, rush Saquon Barkley back. They waited and kind of circled this week as the one that made sense. So the Cardinals need to kind of take that personally as well. Like, look, NFL teams are circling you guys saying, hey, this is where we can get right. This is where we can get healthy. This is where we can, make hay. And so far, NFL teams are right against the Cardinals defense. Offensively, though, I think the Cardinals are going to continue to play well and have a big game.
I predict 37-28 will be the game. Let's say 37-27, a couple field goals for the Giants instead of all touchdowns. Another boat race, but I think this is the week. Fourth quarter turnover will be the difference for the Cardinals, and they'll be able to pull ahead by 2 scores. Maybe we see them do the same thing: build a big lead, give it up a little bit, create a turnover, get the win. 37-27.
Yeah, I think it's going to be something like 35 to 32. I think it'll be another close game, but I think that the Cardinals will pull out a win in the end.
All right, Seth, let's wrap this show up. We'll talk again next week. That's it for this edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, episode 243. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening as always. We will be back again in a week, hopefully with the Cardinals having evened their record at 3-3-1, which technically will be over 500 because that tie counts as a half win right now. But we'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for listening as always.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, Rise Up Sea Red.